I used to think that mutuality meant finding somebody that could hold me the same way that I hold them. Someone who could match my emotional depth or show up the way that I showed up. Someone who could meet me at the same level of awareness and presence and support. And all of that sounds like healthy relationships. That's what relationship spaces teach us. But what I didn't understand at the time was that I was trying to build mutuality without actually having self-holding. And without self-holding, mutuality does not stabilize relationships. It actually destabilizes them. Hi guys, I'm Jackie, and if you're new here, I talk a lot about trauma patterns and nervous system safety and identity work, and how all of those things quietly shapes our relationships, especially the patterns that we don't see repeating. And a lot of my work comes from both personal experience and the coaching that I do with clients. I work with people who are usually very self-aware, very emotionally intelligent, and very capable inside relationships. But they still feel confused about why connection can sometimes feel draining or one-sided or emotionally unsafe. And honestly, the topic of mutuality comes up so often, especially in relationship discourse spaces, because I don't think most people are struggling with finding somebody who actually cares about them. They're struggling with the invisible structure underneath how they are relating to connection in the first place. And mutuality is one of those words that sounds really simple, but psychologically and emotionally, it's actually very layered. So today I want to break down why mutuality is not actually about finding the right people, because it requires something internal first. So most people think that mutuality means equal effort, equal emotional depth, equal support, equal investment, equal ability to be able to hold space. And again, all of that makes sense on the surface. But that definition comes with assumptions. It assumes that both people are already internally stable. And the truth is, most of us learned relationship dynamics through survival adaptations, not internal stability. Many people learned connection through tracking other people's emotions, being emotionally available, over-functioning in support roles, anticipating needs, and becoming the strong one. And all of these traits get praised as emotional maturity. But a lot of the times, they were built through adaptation instead of choice. When connection is learned through adaptation, there is an unconscious orientation that sounds like, if I hold enough, if I understand enough, if I support enough, then the relationship will feel safe. And this is where the idea of mutuality shifts from a relational experience into a regulatory need. You're not just wanting connection, you're using connection to stabilize safety. And when mutuality is tied to safety, that imbalance can feel extremely threatening. So self-holding is the ability to stay connected to yourself while simultaneously being connected to somebody else. It's your ability to be able to stay present with your emotions and your needs and your limits and your internal experience, your identity, without requiring the other person to regulate those things for you. Self-holding does not mean independence in a disconnected way. It means that your nervous system is not outsourcing safety to whether or not somebody can meet you emotionally. And I think this is where it gets really interesting, because people with a high level of capacity, meaning that they can hold space and they can understand patterns, they can stay emotionally present, they often struggle with self-holding more than they realize, because they learned to hold other people before they hold themselves. So they can easily stay grounded in someone else's emotions, but when their emotions are not held back, it feels destabilizing, not just disappointing, destabilizing. It can feel like rejection or abandonment, or it can activate identity wounding. And then suddenly mutuality starts to feel like proof of worth. Mutuality is not two people giving equally. Mutuality is two people who can hold themselves choosing to connect, because our capacity is always fluctuating, right? People have stress, people have trauma responses, people have blind spots, different nervous system thresholds. So mutuality is not about a perfect match. It's about two people who don't collapse when capacity shifts. When you learn how to self-hold, all of your internal questions change. So instead of asking, can they hold me enough to feel safe? You start asking things like, do I like the way this connection feels while I am holding myself? And that is a massive energetic shift, because now connection is moving from survival alignment into resonance and preference. Without self-holding, vulnerability feels like exposure, like you're offering something very fragile, somebody else to protect. But when you're connected with your self-holding, vulnerability becomes expression. You can share openly and honestly without needing somebody else to respond perfectly in order for you to stay intact. And that is what actually allows mutuality to develop. I have noticed that resentment often builds when somebody is holding from survival orientation. So like they think that they're choosing to give, but their nervous system is negotiating safety through giving. And then eventually exhaustion has no choice but to show up. When you peel back the layers, underneath that exhaustion is grief, because you realize that you're asking relationship to give you something that you haven't learned how to give yourself. When you connect to self-holding, that naturally interrupts this cycle. Because when connection is no longer required for safety, it often becomes deeper. It becomes softer and more honest and not so performative, because neither person is trying to maintain connection through overfunctioning. Self-holding will also change how boundaries feel. Without self-holding, boundaries feel like you're risking the relationship, but with self-holding, boundaries feel like clarity. You're not pushing somebody away. You are staying anchored while choosing how you want to stand. I think the biggest takeaway is that mutuality is not something that you find. It is something that you become capable of sustaining. And I want to say this, especially for all the people who have spent their whole life being the strong one. Self-holding is not about becoming less loving. It's not about becoming less supportive. It's about removing the energy of survival from your experience of love. So if you find yourself feeling hurt because people can't hold you the way that you hold them, that is not a sign that you're too much. It is a sign that your relational capacity developed before your self-holding. And self-holding is something that can be easily learned. It's practiced through staying with your emotions, tolerating disappointment without abandoning yourself, and noticing when you are over-holding to maintain connection. When you build self-holding, your relationships start to feel very different. And it's not because other people have changed, it's because your orientation inside connection has changed. Mutuality is not about two people carrying each other. It's about two people walking side by side beside each other, while each person is capable of standing on their own 2 feet. And that is what allows real support to exist. Because when two people can hold themselves, holding each other becomes a choice. If you recognize any of this in yourself, especially if you have consistently been the one to hold your relationships together, this is exactly the type of patterns that I break down inside of my recognition manual. The recognition manual teaches you how to see the orientation and the structures running underneath your connection patterns, where your safety is coming from, how identity gets negotiated in relationships, and why mutuality can feel destabilizing when self-holding hasn't been built yet. If you're ready to understand the mechanics of how you relate and stop over-holding in order to feel secure, then the manual is where I go deeper into this work. I will link below. And if this video helped you learn something new, please let me know in the comments. I would love to hear what landed for you. Thank you for hanging out with me today, and I will see you in the next video.